Hallo und herzlich willkommen zu einer weiteren Folge Chäos. Beim letzten Mal ist ja das Video vom Group Dive aufgetaucht. Ja, und wir müssen uns jetzt quasi damit rumschlagen mit dem Folgen daraus. I created my head tearing at my greasy eye. Yeah. How was I supposed to find the dessert?
見つけなくちゃいけない。自分自身。方法なんて私には分からない。
I said that, but that was barely even a hint. My thoughts weighed heavily on me. I was starting to freak out. My heart was steadily getting crushed by anxiety. I needed to hurry and find a dessert. Whatever it took, I had to find one. If I didn't, I would be done for. Before becoming Nugent's next victim, I had to find one. But I needed to find out how. I had no clue how you were supposed to get one. I needed some kind of hint, something, anything. I had to figure it out fast, or I would lose my chance at finding it. Was I even capable of finding one? This was no time to be at school. It was my own life, or graduating. I didn't need to debate which one was more important. And yet, where was I? Sensing someone approach me, I quickly raised my head and braced myself for contact.
びっくりした。
Rimi! Pat. Rimi was standing there, blinking repeatedly as if she had been stunned by my sudden movement. I made you jump. Stop scaring me like that. All the stress in my body released at once, and I crumbled on top of my desk with a big sigh.
タク、大丈夫？
Fulfilling her usual quota, Rimi peered into my face. I hurriedly lowered my eyes.
真っ青だよ。汗もすごいし、目も血走っちゃってる。
Was Rimi with me or against me? An ally or an enemy? After she had saved me, I'd grown a lot less wary of her. But there were still a ton of unanswered questions that I had yet to figure out. Like why she had been covered in blood at the scene of crucifixion. Or how we were supposed to be such good friends and that we had been classmates since our first year. Yet I had no recollection of it.
タク、体調悪いの？
Do you need to go to this? Rimi tilted her head slightly, a worried expression on her face.
なんでもない。
I turned away from her. I couldn't say it to her face. Oh. When the classes for the day finally ended, I felt like every ounce of energy had been drained from my body. Even during class, all I had done was remain on high alert, repeatedly scanning my surroundings. I hadn't slept since yesterday, but staying this vigilant kept me wide awake. The school day felt like an eternity. In this sheer amount of time I had spent there sent me spiraling into a deep depression. Whereas that the way we perceive time changes depending on our mood. Some say that time flows at a constant rate, but that might not actually be true. The speed of time changes depending on each person's subjective perspective. I've always theorized that it's a conspiracy to homogenize humanity's understanding of the concept of time by implementing units like seconds and hours. Also, they can deceive people into forgetting that perception of time varies from person to person. In building often that theory, if the length of time is dependent on each person's perception, then conversely doesn't that mean that the flow of time can be controlled at will? Okay, so langsam wird's abgedreht. As I thought about that, I remembered Senna talking about controlling other people's will. And conversely.
生まれながらに目が不自由な人でも目の前にある景色がちゃんと見えるようにビデオカメラのような映像機器を介して
Video data from a camera is converted into electrical signals that are sent directly to the brain, causing the person to observe that sequence of images. Conversely, that would mean converting the images that the person observes into electrical signals, then sending them to equipment that can render video. The aforementioned equipment didn't have to be a video camera either. Es können auch sozusagen die Augen sein, die im Kopf drin stecken. For example, what would happen if you connect a person to a hard disk recorder, then showed them recordings of someone's vacation? What if instead of real life recordings you showed them an anime? Technically, anime is 2D, and therefore delusionary. But people who are blind from birth have never seen anything from the 3D world. So if they were shown an anime and told this is how the world is, then they would believe that the 2D world is reality, right? Ich finde diese ganze Thematik so mega interessant. To that person, that delusion would be the reality. And delusion perceived as reality. Komm, wir kicken wieder rein. Das kann nur lustig werden. Here's another example. If person A sent an image from the brain to a hard disk recorder that processed it and transmitted the image to person B's brain, then person A's delusion would become person B's reality. Delusions become reality. In theory, it was possible. Holy shit, I was a genius, laughed my ass off. I was over the moon by how brilliant my theory was. Maybe that was how I would acquire D-Thought. I guess had said they had something to do with the delusions, hadn't she? Alright, I should hurry up and go home so I can look it up. Kickt jetzt noch was rein, oder? Okay. Gerade ist noch nichts verschwommen. Also gerade ist es keine reine Einbildung zumindest. I left the classroom headed for the school entrance, refusing to let my eyes wander anywhere. As I made my way out, I stuck to my usual routine, working as close to the wall as I could, all while keeping my head low so that I wouldn't stand out. The final bell had already rung a little bit ago, so while the students on cleaning duty or doing club shit were still around, basically everyone who had opted to go straight home already had. School always felt somewhat lonely or even wistful after the final bell rang, no matter where I went. It always felt that way, whether they were ancient buildings made out of wood or narrow structures like sumo. Not that I had ever set foot in any wood school buildings in anything other than eroge. As I unconsciously walked through the corridor under the settings on my mind wandering around all sorts of inconsequential stuff, I spotted a strange figure coming toward me. It was a single girl rattling forward, carrying 2 large cardboard boxes. I couldn't see her face behind the boxes, and she probably couldn't see a thing in front of her. Someone was asking to eat shit. If this were an eroge, this scenario would 100% result in us running into each other and me tripping a flag. I thought about attempting to do just that, but concluded that it would be best to keep it as just as thought, because in reality I didn't want to actually do it. Instead, my alarm bells started going off. There was a legitimate possibility that she was one of Shogun's assassins. Boy, Junge. Stay away from her. Be extremely careful. I paid careful attention to each of her steps. She kept drawing nearer, sometimes tilting to the left or to the right. Ist das nicht Dings? Ich bin gerade am Überlegen, ich bin mir da nicht sicher. Könnte das die Austauschschülerin sein? Ich bin mit den Namen irgendwie gerade nicht so optimal. Die kleine Knuffige mit den beiden langen Zöpfen. Die blonde. I meanwhile kept walking along the left wall of the corridor. As the girl started moving to her right, I sped up. When we then passed each other without any issues. But right then I had something fall and I quickly turned my gaze toward without even thinking. Someone had dropped the student handbook. I stopped my tracks. Had the girl with the box dropped it? As I started at the student handbook, my thoughts began to wander. Doubt arose in my mind. Why had that student handbook fallen at the exact moment? It was way too conspicuous. It was practically begging to get picked up. Was it a trap? Had she dropped it on purpose? The girl had been carrying boxes in both hands. Her hands were occupied. If the student handbook had been in her skirt pocket, it would have been entirely impossible for her to take it out and drop it. However, I hadn't seen where it had fallen from. Maybe the girl had been holding it from the very beginning, holding it beneath the boxes. I wasn't sure. I might not have been on purpose. The more realistic option was that it was just a coincidence. I followed the girl's figure with my eyes. I tried to anyway. At that precise moment, the girl took a turn down the hall and disappeared. I'd only seen her for a split second. She hadn't looked like someone I knew. Her hair had been short, I think. No, maybe it had been long actually. I couldn't say for sure what's. Not sure I hadn't seen her face either. When I had passed her, it had been hidden behind the boxes. The student handbook and I were now all alone in the hallway. The sensible options probably were to either pick it up and deliver it to the staff room or rush after the girl and ask her about it. But I was hesitant to carry out either. I looked around me. There were no other students inside. I could somewhat make out the sound of girls laughing happily in the distance. It probably wasn't a trap. The handbook's owner had already left. How could this possibly end up being a trap? Could there be a small bomb inside the handbook? I'd die. No, that was way too unrealistic. If I picked up the handbook right at that moment, nothing would happen. Yeah, nothing was going to happen. Just in case, I should check in the handbook to see who the girl was. She could have been one of Shogun's underlings. I should check her name, class, and photo. Then leave the handbook here. I couldn't be fucked to go after her and give it back. Nevertheless, I still carefully scanned the area just to be sure no one was around. Then after I was sure I was alone, I picked the handbook and carefully opened it to the first page. Alles ausgegraut, interessant. Eek. Und das Bild ist auch nicht vernünftig zu erkennen. I hurriedly threw the handbook away. What was that? I had never been so creeped out before. It was so unbelievably eerie. It didn't just scare me. I felt sick to my stomach. This was very clearly malicious, blatant harassment aimed specifically at me. Who would go so far as to do this? Wait, of course, it had been the girl from before. The girl actually was Shogun's underling. She had to be. Boy, Junge. I had only glanced at the student handbook, but all the information that should have been on the first page, such as the name, the birth date, and the class, was blacked out. In addition, the portrait that should have been attached had been removed. I felt like I was gonna puke. Oof. I was hit with an intense wave of nausea. I wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. Covering my mouth, I moved towards the stairs. I ran through the courtyard with no real destination until I could no longer hold back the urge to vomit. The second I fell to my knees, the entire contents of my stomach began spilling out. Yeah, lecker. The stomach acid made my throat burn. My vision blurred from tears. It was hard to breathe, and the aftertaste was absolutely vile. I must have been way more mixed than I had thought I was. It might have been because of the all-nighter I'd pulled. As I wiped the corners of my mouth, I looked all around me restlessly, but I couldn't see a soul. However, the shadowy corners and the blind spot I had never usually paid attention to had become terrifying to me. I began to think that Yura and Shogun might be hiding in them. The second my brain came up with that, I could no longer take a single step. Someone save me. I wanted to cry. I felt nauseous all over again. I didn't end up vomiting, but I dry heaved several times. The pain made me cry even harder. I was nearly sobbing at this point. But then suddenly someone's hand began to gently rub my back. Oh, Remy. Terrified, I turned around. Pat. Remy was there. Oh. I wasn't being condemned for feeling this way. No, her words were a tender affirmation. She didn't even so much as grimace at the smell of my vomit. She didn't show any sense of disdain, and when she saw my face covered in tears, and not nor when she saw the vomit still clinging to the corners of my mouth. She simply gave me a gentle smile, reassuring me that it would all be okay. She drew closer to me. She continued rubbing my back gently. Why was it that? Before and even now. Every time I had thought I needed to be saved, Remy would always heroically appear in front of me. Right now, Remy was right here. I had reassured her. It reassured me. I felt better. Before I even realized what was happening, my true feelings began to pour out. Despite the fact that I never talked about myself. Maybe that wasn't why I bothered coming to school. Up until now, I'd always thought I would be way better off alone. Of course, even though it was still terrifying to talk to each other. I wasn't at all confident in my ability to actually talk to anyone, but with Shogun and you are trying to destroy my life, I had never been so anxious, scared and alone. I wanted someone to be there for me. They didn't even need to be nice to me. I just wanted someone to be present.
だったら私が一緒にいてあげる。
Oh, pat. Those words had no ill will, no hesitation, no irresolution.
さすがに24時間ずっとは無理だけど。
Her shy gaze suddenly moved up towards the sky. Her eyes were looking so far away. Just what could she be looking at in that sky?
朝一緒に学校行って、学校では休み時間にどうでもいいこと話して、お昼休みは一緒にご飯食べて、夕方一緒に帰って、帰るついでにたまにどこかのお店に寄ったりして、ダックの部屋でちょっとだけおしゃべりして、それでまた明日ねって手を振って別れて、そんなのでいいなら私いくらでもしてあげるよ。そういうの結構憧れなんだ。
Wasn't that kind of almost like being in a relationship? Yup! Das dürfte ungefähr so passen. I was stunned. She was completely serious. I could see it on her face.
どうしてそこまでしてくれるの？
それは
Because if I had ever seen one, right? Because I love you, Taco. I could see it coming from a mile away. That had to be what she was going to say, right? Granted, I had no clue why Remy would have fallen for me. No, wait. This shit had to be a bait. Something similar had happened before with Yua. With her, it had all been nothing more than deception, ending with me drowning in the depths of despair, so I couldn't get my hopes up. I had to prepare for the worst. It was possible that Remy too was an... Ich finde es ja interessant, dass die dort Bishi benutzen, weil ich hab's eigentlich im Kopf, dass im Anime, vielleicht liegt das daran, dass ich die englische Version des Animes geguckt habe und nicht die japanische. Also ich habe den zumindest nur auf Englisch und deshalb habe ich den auch auf Englisch geguckt und nicht in Japanisch mit englischen Untertiteln. Vielleicht soll ich das mal machen. Aber auf jeden Fall sagt sie im Anime, in der englischsprachigen Version des Animes nicht Bishi, sondern Tenhat. She suddenly saluted to me. Also der Salut, der ist der gleiche, aber halt sie sagte eigentlich immer Tenhat und nicht, oder Tenhat und nicht Bishi. I was taken aback by the suddenness of it and my mind shot to the possibility that she was about to reveal her true self. And yet all that I saw on Remy's face was the same bright, gentle smile.
そんなの友達だからに決まってるでしょ。私にしてみればタクを助けてあげるのは当然なの。どうしてとか寂しいこと言わない。わかった？
Because we were friends. If she had said that because I love you, Taco, and this is how I'm gonna show it, it would have felt like my life had begun anew. But even if we would be friends, that alone made me incredibly happy. Having someone being kind to me. Having someone to do things for me without expecting anything in return. I couldn't believe how happy it made me be. It might have been the very first time I had ever felt like that. But above all else, it made me realize that I wasn't alone. To me, Rumi's existence was my salvation. The nausea I had felt earlier had finally subsided, and I was feeling much better. Rumi held out a vermilion handkerchief. It had a faint floral scent. I meekly accepted it, but I was hesitant to use it. Oh, sie ist einfach so knuffig. Thank you. I felt guilty about it, but I ultimately decided that I would accept her generosity. I wiped off the vomit that had stained the corners of my mouth with the handkerchief. It was the first time I had ever received a present from a girl that wasn't a family member. I wasn't so sure about calling it a present though. For me, someone who was so isolated and helpless, even a simple thing like this felt like an irreplaceable treasure to me. I felt so delighted, so relieved that I nearly started to cry all over again. Her voice was so carefree. Apparently she already intended to make good on what she had said before, that she would stay by my side. Not that I had told her whether I wanted her to or not yet. But it wasn't like I had any intention of saying no. Being alone terrified me. I didn't want to be alone. As I was now, I had no one to rely on but Rumi. However, I still couldn't say that I was stable now, even with Rumi with me. Mir ist gerade so etwas aufgefallen. Taku hat ja, glaube ich, kein Bad bei sich oben. Wo wäscht er sich? Geht er dafür immer in ein offenes Bad? Oder, weil er hat da ja keine Dusche, er hat ja nur den Container, in dem er lebt, und seine Küche ist ja auch draußen im Grunde. Also, und er hat eine Waschtrommel. Aber er hat, glaube ich, kein Bad. Also eine Badewanne erst recht nicht und auch keine Dusche, zumindest soweit ich mich entsinne. Das ist mir jetzt gerade so aufgefallen nebenbei, aber egal. On the way back, I chose to take a different route than usual, walking cautiously all the way. I couldn't stop trembling. Every corner with even an inch of shadow seemed dangerous. Every time I got to any kind of intersection, I was tormented by delusions of Yua Shogun waiting for me at the end of it, making me freeze in place. Whenever that happened, Rumi would take over. She would look over towards the end of the intersection road, and when the coast was clear, she would nod to me. Oh, adorable. Oh. Relieved, I followed after her. Everything she had done without even a hint of irritation. I was slightly hesitant to tell her. If I said something here, Rumi could become a target for Shogun. I would get her involved. My mouth had already started moving. I definitely didn't feel comfortable with the prospect of getting her involved, but if I didn't explain to her what was happening here, she wouldn't be able to understand the gravity of the situation. For the sake of my well-being, I had to turn a blind eye to the possibility that I might put her in danger. She had been the one who said she would stay by my side, so I was sure she would be fine with it, so I told her everything. I told her that Shogun was the actual Nugent culprit, that Yua was one of his underlings, that they were both stalking me, what had happened in front of 107 the other day. I let it all bear, albeit not without a fair share of stuttering. Yep. When I told her about the time Shogun appeared before in a wheelchair, Rimi's lips pursed and she began to ponder. I had always wanted to ask her about him back then. Seemed like now was a good time as any. She certainly didn't sound like she had.
思い出して。大切なことだ。
でも
Rimi frowned almost like she was hesitant to say what was on her mind.
そもそもあの時渋谷の駅前が無人だったなんてことなかったよ。いつもと同じだった。
So that was what Rimi had seen back then. I was hoping that she and I would agree on what we had seen, but I guess not. Rimi or me, which one of us had been in what the area was actually supposed to look like. Had I been wrong about what I'd seen after all? Had that empty Shibuya been nothing more than a delusion of mine? But if it was, then there was a small discrepancy. An old man had appeared in that empty Shibuya, Shogun. What was the explanation for that? If the Shibuya being empty part was delusion, then Shogun could be a delusion as well.
駅前って人が多いでしょ。だから車椅子の人がいてもなかなか気がつかないだろうし。要するに見てないってこと。
Oh, sie ist knuffig. Sie war zu knuffig. Und ich finde es halt immer wieder belustigend, wie ähnlich Rimi Syra ist. Vom Design her. At the very least, I knew Shogun himself wasn't a delusion. At first I thought he was just a delusion, but ever since the group dive video had come out, my perception of him had swapped to the exact opposite. Shogun was real, he existed in reality. But that empty Shibuya, meanwhile, it could have been just a delusion. And in reality the front of the station had been overflowing with people, just like it always was. I was the only one who had observed something different, a different set of scenery than everyone else. But how could that be possible? Die Antwort dafür hast du schon gehört. Rimi joined hands together in prayer like gesture. I really wanted to get back to my base as soon as possible. The reason I had taken such a long detour was because I was afraid of the possibility that you or Shogun might have been ready to ambush me. It wasn't so I could go on some shopping spree. But if I were to refuse after all that, she might end up going back on her promise to stay by my side. If I were to fuck up badly enough, she could get angry and leave by herself. What the hell should I do? This sucked. I needed Rimi to stay with me. I wasn't sure I couldn't make it to my base alone. In the end, I wasn't able to refuse. So I did what I had to in order to survive and stuck to as close as possible to her. I guess it was reasonable to think that you wouldn't attack me in public place like this. But I was more afraid that they might have been hiding among the crowd. Every time I would almost bump into someone, I would scream inside my head. Rimi's words frightened me. I quickly retreated behind her. Rimi was right. There were 2 police cars parked on the road, and right next to them were 3 police officers in uniform. The police had also been pursuing me. Obviously, the basis behind it was completely false accusation, but the incompetent police didn't know what. Okay, ich würde sagen, aber an dem Punkt beende ich jetzt mal die Folge, weil der scheint wohl ein Protest zu sein, aber, oder, those cops might have been searching for me too, or so I thought, but that apparently wasn't the case. The cops' gazes were fixated on the crowd of people marching down the street like they owned it. Were they protesters or something? They were carrying the signs and flags, and they were wearing the typical dresses and headbands you would see among these kinds of people. There was a child marching along with his parents, holding hands with both of them. He looked like he had no idea where he was, and he was wearing a t-shirt with the words "Whose eyes are his eyes?" written on it in permanent inker. I bit my lip.
何のデモだろうね。
The people marching were of all ages and genders. Their march was mostly silent and similar, but at times they all echoed their chants. Drive the devil out of Siberia, expel his demons from this place.
悪魔
On the signs were a number of different things, such as drive the devil out of town or protect Siberia from terrorists. It must have been some kind of protest against the new gen incidents. There was no point in protesting against that. If they had the time to do that, they could. Then could they please just hunt down Shogun and kill him? Then I wouldn't need to worry about him anymore.
タク行こう。
Clearly uninterested, we returned to Gelsen away from the protesters and quickly started walking towards the entrance to the CD shop. Und ich würde sagen, an dem Punkt beende ich diese Folge. Vielen Dank fürs Zuschauen und bis zum nächsten Mal.